we Muslims are not afraid of controversy. We only fear Allah. So I am a human biologist. I have a PhD in biological anthropology. I do teach courses in evolution. In fact, to tell you the truth, I studied evolution before I accepted Islam. Evolution was no hindrance for me to become Muslim. And when I teach courses and talk about the beauty of Allah's creation, I say to my students, very few of whom are Muslim, most are Christians or Jews, and I say to them, look at the similarities, the genetic similarities among all of the life that has been created. That is a sign of the signature of a single artist. And I say to them, you would never confuse a Monet painting with a Van Gogh. You would never confuse it, because every artist has a signature, has a style of presenting their creativity. And the style that we see is in the unity of the genetic message across all living species on this planet. So I'm, again, very grateful to be here to really, for the first time among Muslims, to share this idea of evolution and try to put it in the Islamic context that I have internalized as a practicing Muslim. So I have a few slides. I'm going to try to run through these. What I'd like to do is talk about evolution in meaning biological evolution. I'd like to talk about the significance of evolution in the 21st century now, differentiate between microevolution and macroevolution, talk about the problem with the concept of species or what we understand to be a species, and then really get to this heart of what is human evolution. Because as I've talked with colleagues, with other Muslims, the problem really is humans. That we want to know, where do we fit in this world? Where do we belong? And what are the forces that control us in terms of how do we change? Remember that science, especially evolutionary science, is designed to tell you how things change, not why. Why comes from our Islam. You know, when we want to know why something happened, we go to the Islam. And then I have finally to say something about the modern challenges, new data that actually expands this neo-Darwinian paradigm. So we want to say, first of all, that evolution is due to changes in inherited characteristics of biological populations over generations. And we know that things change. The only thing that doesn't change is Allah. But everything else changes. Everything else evolves, changes, evolves. That's all evolution really means. It doesn't mean there's no God. It doesn't mean that humans are in control. It only means that things change. Human evolution refers to the evolutionary process leading to the appearance of modern humans. And we are a single species, Homo sapiens sapiens. There actually are no biological races among humans. There's variation, but we are all so closely related that the small differences between us are really very minor from a scientific point of view. Human evolution is really just a part of this larger pattern of evolution on the planet. In other words, we see ourselves biologically as being part of a larger biological system. And human ancestry, our own species, is really very recent. As Allah says, wasn't there a time when we were like not even thought of, not known of? So
We can't be so egocentric, we can't be so childish to think it's just all about us, that the party didn't begin until we showed up. The party's been going on. Allah in His majesty has been changing and creating and producing species before the human being came into existence. And we fully expect that this process will continue. Hopefully not today. Hopefully it won't end for us today. But the final end of all species is extinction. In human evolution, we're particularly interested in the genus Homo. In fact, I showed you the Latin name for us, Homo sapiens sapiens. So that first Homo, that's the genus. Sapiens is the species name. That second sapiens is the subspecies name, which is the same as the racial name. So if people ask you, what is your race? Just tell them you're sapiens. So why is evolution important? First of all, evolution is the outcome of adaptation to changing environments. So the environment is very important. This is why a mutation like sickle cell, which is a mutation, is advantageous in a malarial environment, but outside of that environment, it's deleterious. Nothing in biology makes sense outside of the context of evolution, because what evolution is an organizing principle, that's all. It's an organizing principle for taking all the diversity that we see in life and trying to make sense of it, okay? So it's not just random bits of information. And finally, without biology, it's impossible to understand medicine and other fields. And we must not, especially as Muslims, deprive ourselves of contributing to the areas of biological sciences, to the areas of medicine. We have an important contribution to make, but without understanding this overriding evolutionary paradigm, it's very difficult to make that contribution, maybe even impossible, because you want to understand antibiotic-resistant bacteria, for example. So the key philosophical questions are humans, biologically, are humans part of the rest, separate from the rest of creation, or are we part of the natural world? And in a sense, this ego versus nature kind of depicts it. Are we a part of the magnitude, the magnificence of Allah's creation, or are we somehow separate from that? And remember, we're only talking about the biological. We're not talking about people's souls. That's another domain. That is not something that can be quantified by science. Science can only tell us about a little part of the world that can be quantified, that can be measured. That which cannot be measured, like the content of one's soul, that science can't measure that. Sometimes we forget it, especially when we're accusing other people of having no souls. These naturalistic explanations of what happens in the universe are not antithetical to belief in Allah. These explanations are a human attempt to understand how nature works. We are simply exploring the natural world created by Allah. And we have to be humble in our exploration, because we know we don't have all the answers. But because we believe firmly in the logic of Allah's creation, we explore it so as to get closer to Him. You hear what I'm saying? We want to get closer to Allah. We don't want to just be dogmatic, blindly following. We want to really feel the presence of Allah. And we do that through the study of the natural world. So living organisms that I'm showing here, they sit like leaves at the tips of the branches of the tree of life. All of this is created by Allah. And humans are part of that. I tell my students, and I tell you, that the unity of life is a manifestation of the singularity of its creator. And the creator is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. because of this continuity of life forms, we scientists have had to develop specific sets of criteria to identify a distinct species. It's not just random, you know. This is the Linnaean classification system where species are down here at this lower edge. But we have to examine evolution as it occurs at all of these levels of analysis. The professional designation of a species includes information on the ecology of the species, the geography, where is it located, its genetics, its anatomy, its physiology, its behavior. That's the problem with fossils, is that with a fossil you can't get the genetic information, because a fossil is a rock. So we haven't been able to extract DNA from a fossil. When we get DNA, Neanderthal DNA, it's from a subfossil, meaning that there's still organic material there. But if there's no organic material, we can't get the genetic information. Therefore, even when you see morphologies that look similar between a fossil and a living organism, it doesn't mean that the genetics are identical. It doesn't mean that at all. We can't test that. Species are dynamic, they're constantly changing over time in response to different environmental conditions. And one of the things I'd like to present to you is later on in the talk is about epigenetics. And I'm sorry that Dr. Babuna misspoke about epigenetics. Epigenetics doesn't change the gene. It only changes the gene expression, but the gene stays the same. So epigenetics doesn't undermine evolution. It expands evolution. It makes us understand that the environment is very important in the expression of the genes and what protein will actually be expressed by the genes. So this is a wonderful thing, but it doesn't undermine evolution, it only expands it. And finally, let's see, these are microevolutionary changes that we're usually talking about within a species, but then those changes can accumulate over time so that we see a macroevolutionary event. That is something new that seems to be emerging, but it's been emerging gradually, gene by gene by gene, okay? Macroevolution refers to changes above the species level, so that the genus, family, order, class, phylum, kingdom, domain levels, okay? So when we talk about humans, humans fit biologically into the order primates, and these are all of the primates, their classes. And we start off millions of years ago, actually about 84 million years ago, with the earliest primates, and they're preceded by a pre-primate, a proto-primate, as we would say, a precursor to the primates. And they have their own lineages. So this notion that we came from monkeys is false. Like, you can't look at a baboon and say, oh, that's my ancestor. That's silly. All of the contemporary primates, they have their own trajectories, you know, and we have our own. So but the notion is that there was a common ancestor, and then that common ancestor diversified, and then the diversification proceeded over many, many, many generations until we have lorises and lemurs and tarsers and New World monkeys and Old World monkeys and the small-bodied apes and then the great apes. And in terms of our
anatomy, we most favor the great apes. In terms of our anatomy, we most favor the great apes. And I've spent some time in Rwanda chasing the mountain gorillas. And I'll never forget chasing these gorillas until finally they slowed down and waited for us. And I looked at the gorillas in the eye. They have these beautiful brown eyes. Wallahi, I felt there was an intelligence behind the eye. If we could just take time to understand their position in Allah's creation. You know, it was really, really something, you know.
So I could see the similarities. If you've ever seen ape hands, they're like our hands. Their feet are not like our feet, but their hands are like our hands. And so you recognize that anatomically there is this continuity, this connection, but they have been on their own trajectory. So the common ancestor is not any contemporary ape. The common ancestor would be something 84 million years ago, or 7 million years ago, or 14 million years ago in the case of the orangutan and human. So what do we know about, scientifically, about the sequence of human evolution? And these are some questions that I posed. And I want to remind you that, you know, I've been a Muslim for a very long time. And I've thought about these. And I've been an evolutionary biologist and a scientist for a very long time. And I've had to reconcile this within myself and understand and try to use what seems to some people to be a contradiction I've tried to use that as a way of getting deeper into my faith. Are human biology and behavior subject to the same kinds of changes that we see in other life forms? And the answer to that is yes, we are subject to those changes. You know, if we were to flood a room of mammals with high levels of carbon monoxide, all of the mammals would die. All of them. We are subject to the same kinds of changes. We produce mutations. We are subject to genetic drift. We are subject to natural selection. Does our species remain unchanged while all other life changes? No. Only Allah remains unchanged. Everything else changes, and I think we should say alhamdulillah behind that, because we don't want to stay the same way all the time. We want there to be progress, just like we want something better for our children than we want for ourselves. So we want to see progress. If we have changed over time, what did this change come from, and how did we change? Well, this is the mission of that evolutionary paradigm, to help us understand what changed and how did it change. Okay? What is the scientific evidence for such change, and are we still changing? The answer to both of those are yes. There's scientific evidence. Now, this is a diagram. This is a diagram that speaks to it summarizes the fossil hominids, that is, the human-like creatures that have been found. And you can see that we go all the way back to 7 million years ago with Sahelanthropus chilensis, way up at the top. And then through the millions of years, not thousands of years, millions of years, we see these forms that emerge, and the lines indicate when they were first observed and when we no longer find them in the fossil record. So as you can see, if this is the present time here, these species are all extinct. They're creations of Allah, but they didn't make it into the present time. The green lines represent examples of the genus Homo, which is our species, Homo, okay? But we're down here at the very bottom. What you can see here is that some of the species lasted a very short time. Others lasted, like Homo erectus, for a very long time. We're down here at the bottom. We really haven't been around that long. But for the first time in 2 million years, we only have one kind of human on the planet. Only one kind, Homo sapiens. So it behooves us to understand our place in nature, to appreciate this wonderful position Allah has put us in, to study His creation. Now, the model that we have, and we're really coming up with new discoveries every day, is that the model that we're working with is that about 2 million years ago, we're picking up Homo ergaster, which becomes, thank you, we're picking, you know, they say, never give a Jackson the microphone, because we're going to either preach or sing or dance. I'll only do the former, preaching. I won't do any singing or dancing. So, but here you have a Homo ergaster, which is the predecessor to Homo erectus. And so we're going up through time here, and you can see that the species is changing. The genus is the same, Homo, but the species is changing gradually through time. What's interesting and what has recently been discovered is that our species actually has remnants of DNA from some of these archaic species. Kind of alarming. The first group they found it in were in Europeans. They found that many Europeans had segments of DNA from Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis. Then they found another archaic Homo species, the Denisovans, and their DNA also shows up in some of the Southeast Asians and into Australia. And then they said, well, we're finding this, but what about the Africans? We're finding now some remnants of Homo heidelbergensis, and it's not showing here, but I'll show it to you on another slide, where Homo heidelbergensis contributed. So you're seeing this gradual change over time. In the emergence of modern humans, we seem to be kind of a hybrid species in a sense. And we're still making sense out of all of this, but the important thing is that the pre-modern humans, that is the ones before us, are not monkeys. The pre-modern humans have elements that remind us of ourselves. That suggests that while we are important, we're not the special creations the way that the creationists, so-called creationists, would have us believe. That there's greater depth, there's greater nuance, there's greater complexity than their simple arguments would allow for. I prefer to embrace that truth. So here we're looking at the emergence of modern humans in recent evolutionary time. And we're starting again 2 million years ago with Homo erectus. The heidelbergensis you can see is there. If we follow these lines, at some point